Have you ever found yourself just sort of lost in this relentless cycle? Like overwhelming emotional pain, maybe this really deep shame, or just this constant anxiety, and no matter what, you just can't seem to figure out why. It's that really profound feeling, isn't it? That your life feels troubled somehow, that something is fundamentally off, but you can't connect the dots. You might even start wondering if there's something inherently wrong with you. If any of that sounds familiar, well, you're absolutely not alone. So many of us navigate this kind of experience, often, totally in silence. Today, we're embarking on a really crucial deep dive. We're going into a profound and, let's be honest, often profoundly misunderstood area, complex PTSD or C-PTSD. And we're drawing from the invaluable, truly life-changing work of psychotherapist Pete Walker. His books, things like Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, Homesteading in the Calm Eye of the Storm, and The Tao of Fully Feeling, they've basically provided a map for so many people on their healing journey. His insights don't just explain things, they really illuminate this clear pathway towards understanding, towards self-acceptance, and ultimately towards a sense of wholeness.
Yeah, absolutely. And our mission today really is to equip you with some foundational knowledge, hopefully spark some of those crucial aha moments, and provide a clear kind of actionable framework for understanding C-PTSD. We'll explore its often hidden origins, usually in childhood trauma. We'll delve into the various ways it shows up, sometimes in really surprising ways in our adult lives. And crucially, we want to illuminate the practical, tangible pathways to healing. We'll be drawing on real-world examples and some really intimate personal insights from Walker himself. The idea is to offer you a sense of shared experience, a clearer direction, so you don't feel quite so lost in the wilderness of your own emotional landscape. What's truly fascinating here, and honestly, often the first big wave of relief for people, is just putting a name to their experiences. Suddenly, it's not just random suffering. They realize they're not defective or crazy or somehow fundamentally broken, but actually they've developed entirely normal, though challenging responses to really abnormal, often unbearable conditions. So this deep dive really aims to validate that experience for you, to provide the clarity that, understanding is always the first most powerful step toward significant, lasting transformation. It's about shifting from that default of self-blame to hopefully self-compassion, recognizing that what you're experiencing is actually a testament to your system's incredible, though maybe sometimes misdirected, efforts to protect you.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this a bit then. When we talk about complex PTSD, C-PTSD, how exactly is it different from, say, traditional PTSD? I think many of us have a handle on PTSD stemming from a single, big, impactful event. But C-PTSD, it sounds more pervasive, almost foundational for some people.
You've absolutely hit on a critical distinction there. While both involve trauma, complex PTSD is, generally a more severe and pervasive form. It's differentiated from traditional PTSD by several key features. So traditional PTSD, it typically arises from a single severe traumatic event like, think a car accident, maybe a natural disaster, or combat experience. The trauma usually has a clear beginning and end, and the individual often has a memory, maybe fragmented, but a memory of that specific event. They might experience flashbacks of that event, hypervigilance, avoiding triggers related to that specific thing.
Okay, so more focused on a specific incident.
Exactly. Whereas C-PTSD, on the other hand, it arises from prolonged, repeated trauma, and crucially, inescapable trauma, almost always starting in childhood, where escape was literally or figuratively impossible. This isn't like a single wound, it's more like a series of ongoing compounding injuries that actually reshape the entire emotional and neurological landscape of a developing person. Pete Walker identifies 5 common and often really debilitating features that distinguish C-PTSD. Things like emotional flashbacks, pervasive toxic shame, patterns of self-abandonment, a really vicious inner critic, and that deep-seated social anxiety. Those are kind of the hallmark signs, and they paint a picture of a life lived constantly on high alert, often feeling deeply disconnected from one's authentic self.
That distinction really clarifies it. When you mention those childhood origins, what's really at the core of that? What kind of prolonged trauma are we typically talking about? Is it always overt abuse?
That's a great question. Because at its deepest root, the core wound in C-PTSD is often emotional neglect. Now, this can be incredibly insidious, right? Because it can happen even if overt physical abuse isn't present at all. Imagine a child growing up in an environment where their emotional needs are just consistently dismissed, ignored, maybe even ridiculed. If both parents are involved in this, creating this inescapable environment of emotional deprivation, the child essentially starves emotionally. They learn deep down that their feelings don't matter, or even worse, that their feelings are somehow dangerous or wrong.
Wow. So it's the lack of something essential,
Precisely. And when the abuse and neglect are multidimensional, meaning, verbal, emotional, and sometimes physical or sexual abuse layered on top, the severity of PTSD just deepens significantly. It becomes interwoven into every aspect of a person's being. It's that prolonged absence of genuine parental living interest, that consistent engagement, that attuned presence, particularly in those really crucial formative years. That's what creates this overwhelming sense of emptiness, this profound feeling of being unseen, and this constant aching anxiety that can follow someone right through their entire adult life. So yeah, it's not just about what happened to them, but also about what didn't happen for them. That consistent, loving presence that should have been there, that bedrock of safety.
That makes so much sense, because you hear it time and again. Individuals report this profound sense of relief once they finally grasp the concept of these emotional flashbacks, for instance. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces just click into place. They finally understand why maybe other psychological approaches or even spiritual practices they've tried just didn't seem to have the answers for them. This understanding, it feels truly pivotal. It helps in shedding misdiagnoses maybe, and combating those often deeply ingrained self-destructive habits of self-hate. It's like finding the missing key, isn't it? Unlocking a new way to understand themselves. And Pete Walker's own personal experiences, they really highlight this so powerfully. He openly recounts his own childhood, recalling how these deeply embedded family rules just forbade any form of self-esteem. It was like not allowed. He talks about frequent face flapping, which, while his family minimized it at the time, and even he did for years, it deeply impacted him. It's just such a powerful illustration of how insidious these forms of trauma can be, especially when they're normalized within a family system.
He even shares this really poignant personal anecdote about a family video from his childhood. In it, he's seen repetitively smacking his own hand, calling himself a bad girl, a phrase his parents apparently used, while his family is in the background, he says, roaring with mocking delight, unquote. He describes seeing this years later as a pivotal moment, the thing that finally broke through his own denial about his family's abusive nature. It just demonstrates how something seemingly small, when you view it through the lens of a child's experience and, a trauma-informed perspective, can be incredibly impactful and reveal the truth of one's past.
It really does, and this raises such an important question for all of us, doesn't it? How many of us have minimized our own traumatic experiences simply because we thought they weren't bad enough compared to what others endured? We do this comparison thing, right? We compare our suffering to some perceived standard of worse trauma, convincing ourselves that our experiences weren't significant enough to warrant the emotional pain we feel, or certainly not enough to need healing. Walker himself admits he minimized his father's frequent face slapping by comparing it to a friend whose father used to actually punch his child. This tendency, this minimizing our own suffering, it's such a pervasive aspect of denial, and often it's a pattern installed by the very abusers who inflicted the trauma in the first place. It significantly delays healing. The hard truth is, verbal and emotional abuse can be just as soul damaging, sometimes maybe even more so in their insidious nature than physical abuse. They attack the very core of your developing self.
Right, that really lands. Okay, so with this understanding of Cornetesi's origins, what does this all mean for how we cope? How we survive? Pete Walker introduces us to the 4 Fs, these primary trauma types. Let's really dive into these because each one is essentially a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, right? A way to deal with that profound abandonment depression. You mentioned the thing at the very core of KDDs. They're not just personality quirks, they're highly developed survival strategies.
Exactly, they are survival strategies. These 4 Fs are deeply ingrained, often totally unconscious survival responses. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And what's truly insightful here is how these seemingly disparate behaviors, from aggressive control on one end to relentless people-pleasing on the other, they're all desperate, often unconscious attempts to avoid the exact same core pain. That profound abandonment depression that sits at the heart of C-PTSD. Now, untraumatized individuals, they can access these responses flexibly, appropriately, depending on the actual threat or situation. But in C-PTSD, these responses become polarized. They become habitual. A person gets stuck, primarily in one or maybe two of these modes. And that makes it really difficult to adapt to new situations or respond genuinely to others or form healthy connections because their system is just always defaulting back to survival mode.
Stuck on repeat.
Pretty much. So first we have the fight type. This one is often linked to what Walker calls the narcissistic defense. Fight types basically seek safety through control, intimidation, sometimes outright aggression. They might initially present as charming bullies, using charisma to lure people in, but then quickly pivot to using contempt, criticism, maybe even subtle manipulation to overpower others and maintain that sense of dominance. They often rely on scapegoats, too, to offload their own internal frustrations and shame, projecting their flaws onto other people. They can demand unconditional love, but their unrealistic expectations and often aggressive demands almost inevitably alienate potential intimates. It pushes people away.
So it's self-defeating in the end.
Totally. Walker describes the charming bully who initially lures you in with this show of genuine interest, makes you feel seen, right? But then within minutes, shifts into this relentless monologue, trapping you as a captive audience. There's no pause, no room for actual reciprocal interaction. It's a subtle but really powerful form of control. It's designed to maintain their dominance and avoid any hint of vulnerability. In their most extreme manifestations, devolved fight types can become sociopathic, ranging along a continuum from, say, corrupt politicians to vicious criminals. They are typically convinced of their own perfection, seeing everyone else as the problem. And that, understandably, often makes genuine recovery incredibly challenging because they lack insight into their own behavior. This response is fundamentally about avoiding vulnerability at all costs by staying on the offensive, believing that attack is the best form of defense.
So, if a fight type often genuinely believes they're perfect and it's always everyone else's fault, does that mean they can't recover? Or is there still a pathway for them, even if it's, incredibly challenging, to break through that denial and move towards healthier ways of relating?
That's such a crucial question. And the answer is, well, it depends. For fight types who aren't true, diagnosable narcissists, meaning they still possess some capacity for empathy, some flicker of self-reflection, understanding the incredibly high cost of their aggressive behavior is absolutely key. They need to genuinely see and feel how their intimidation pushes away intimates, how their constant rage or their need for control creates this downward spiral of power, but also profound alienation. It's a difficult, often really painful realization to come to, but it's essential for breaking free from that self-defeating pattern. The pathway really begins when the pain of their isolation starts to outweigh the perceived safety they get from their control. They need to learn somehow that true strength lies in vulnerability and connection, not just in dominance.
A hard lesson to learn, I imagine.
Incredibly hard. Okay, next up is the flight type. This one is characterized by the obsessive-compulsive defense. Flight types basically escape emotional pain and that internal discomfort through compulsive busyness, relentless perfectionism, and this often overwhelming tendency to get stuck in their head. They overanalyze, they intellectualize their feelings rather than actually feeling them. They are often the workaholics who hold their addiction up like it's a badge of pride, constantly rushing, always have a to-do list, always feeling like they're just one step ahead of their anxieties. They use activity, mental gymnastics, and external achievement to essentially dissociate from their deeper emotional pain and that ever-present threat of abandonment depression. It's like a way to outrun their inner world.
Yeah, it's interesting because Pete Walker talks very openly about his own flight response. He details how it got channeled into excelling academically, professionally. But he noted the rewards, the grades, the achievements. They never truly penetrated his toxic shame. They never really made him feel good enough deep down. He describes his own ADHD-like busyness as this lifelong, maybe unconscious way to outrun fear and that shame-saturated depression. And he speaks really candidly about his struggle with busyholism. It's such a powerful and relatable example, isn't it? How these patterns can manifest even in highly successful, outwardly very functional individuals. It underscores that C-PTSD doesn't really care about your external achievements.
Absolutely, it's deep inside. So for flight types, recovery involves really courageously moving into their feelings, especially allowing themselves to grieve those profound losses of childhood, the missed connection, the unreceived love, the safety they didn't have. Self-compassionate crying, allowing those tears, is vital for shrinking obsessive thoughts and that compulsive rushing. It finally allows them to slow down and just be present. Cultivating neutral, which he describes as a state of stillness, quiet, receptive presence, is essential, as is learning to relax and decrease that habit of habitual doing. This helps them acquire like a gearbox to engage life at various speeds, not just stuck in hyperspeed all the time. It allows for rest, reflection, and eventually genuine connection. It's really about learning that it's safe to just be, rather than constantly needing to do.
Learning to downshift.
Exactly. Okay, the third type, the freeze type. This one operates with the dissociative defense. freeze types deal with overwhelming trauma by dissociating, shutting down, retreating into themselves. They often have very few positive relational experiences because their system's primary response is just to disconnect, to go numb. This makes them extremely reluctant to seek intimacy or even therapy because vulnerability feels like an absolute existential threat. They might project their inner critic's perfectionistic demands onto others, subtly finding fault everywhere, which then serves to justify their deep-seated isolation. For them, isolation has historically been a smart, safety-seeking behavior. It was a way to remain unseen and thus seemingly unharmed. Stay small, stay quiet, stay safe.
Wow, that sounds incredibly isolating. How do you even begin to connect with someone in that state?
Yeah, building trust with a freeze type is a long, incredibly gradual process. It demands immense patience and consistency from others, like a therapist or a friend. Many are completely unaware of their pervasive inner critic or their underlying emotional pain. They've become so dissociated from it all that it feels totally alien. Pete Walker's experience with a client he calls Phyllis perfectly illustrates this challenge. She used dark humor, a lot of sarcasm, this seemingly detached demeanor to resist linking her current suffering to her childhood trauma. She even laughed at the idea of her own fear. He recalls her saying things like, "Look at me, Pete, nothing scares me. I am so relaxed that I can hardly hold my body up in this chair." All while her body language was betraying this deep-seated tension, this rigidity. This defensive posture made it extraordinarily difficult for her to even acknowledge, let alone begin to process, her underlying terror.
That's such a vivid picture. It really highlights the depth of that dissociation, that disconnect. So, okay, once that fragile trust is eventually built, what does recovery look like for a freeze type? How do they begin to sort of thaw out?
It's a slow thaw, for sure. Once trust is established, recovery for freeze types involved a really crucial step. Directing that often repressed anger, which might initially leak out as sarcasm or cynicism, directing it at the actual abusers, the original source of their childhood pain. This helps to break the pattern of internalizing all the blame. Eventually, this externalized anger can make space for self-compassion and, importantly, for crying, for feeling the sadness underneath. Movement therapy and aerobic exercise can also be incredibly beneficial. They help to release the immense somatic tension that gets held in the body from prolonged states of being frozen, of being braced. It's about slowly, gently re-engaging the body in its natural emotional release mechanisms, waking things up again.
Bringing the body back online.
Exactly. And finally, we have the fawn type. This one is characterized by the codependent defense. Fawn types seek safety and connection by essentially merging with others' wishes and needs. They fundamentally forfeit their own desires, their boundaries, their very identity in the process. They are often the parentified children of narcissistic or highly demanding parents. They were continuously attacked or shamed for any healthy self-interest or any attempt at self-assertion. They learn, often completely unconsciously, that their value comes solely from serving others, pleasing others, being what others need them to be. Their safety hinges on constant appeasement. Keep everyone happy, then maybe I'll be okay.
Yeah, it's a powerful insight that Walker offers there. He notes that the degree to which a survivor strains to please him, even in a therapeutic setting, directly reflects the degree to which their parents were dangerous and unpredictable. That's chilling. Fawn types really struggle, don't they, to stay present to that deep, overwhelming fear that triggers their self-abdication. It must be a constant, exhausting battle to resist the urge to immediately try to please and placate, even when it means sacrificing their own well-being, their own needs.
It's utterly exhausting. Recovery for fawn types is multifaceted. It involves deep psychoeducation about their parents' role in creating this fawn response, understanding it was a survival mechanism, not some personal failing. That's huge. Then it's about courageously facing the fear of self-abdication, that absolute terror of what might happen if they don't please others. What if they say no? What if they have a different opinion? This leads to consciously reducing those ingratiating behaviors and systematically deconstructing that automatic matching and mirroring of others' emotions or opinions. A crucial affirmation, and one Walker personally struggled with for decades, he says, is learning that disapproval is okay with me. Learning to tolerate someone else not being happy with you. It's about building an internal sense of self-worth that's independent of external validation. Learning to be comfortable with others' discomfort if it means honoring their own truth, their own needs, their own no.
That's a huge shift. And it's important to remember, right, that these aren't always pure types. People can be these fascinating, intricate hybrids. Like you mentioned, the fight fawn type, someone who might seem aggressive outwardly, but deep down, they're desperate for love.
maybe prone to love addiction, becoming totally self-sacrificing in romance.
Exactly. Or the fawn flight type, the person who might appear like a Mother Teresa figure, always escaping their own feelings of self-abandonment by obsessively caregiving for others. Sometimes this manifests as OCD-like tendencies, like that client Walker described, who had a dozen different color-coded toothbrushes for microcleaning every single corner of their home. A way to control the environment when they couldn't control their inner world.
Right. These combinations really show the intricate, complex ways trauma shapes our coping mechanisms and our internal landscapes. It's not simple boxes. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, and often where the most debilitating aspects of C-PTSD seem to reside. A common thread, this pervasive enemy across all C-PTSD experiences, is the insidious influence of the inner and outer critic. Let's talk about these nasty and sneaky tricks, as Walker calls them, that keep survivors trapped, often for a lifetime.
You're absolutely right. They are incredibly insidious. The inner critic. It's like the superego gone completely rogue. It's this highly toxic internalized voice that relentlessly blames you, shames you, tortures you with these impossible perfectionistic demands and totally exaggerated fears of endangerment. It's like a cruel echo, a dark mirror, reflecting the constant disparagement, criticism, and judgment you probably received from your parents or primary caregivers. This inner critic is the emotional engine, really, of that abandonment depression. It's what keeps you stuck in toxic shame by constantly finding fault and projecting danger onto situations that are actually safe. It's like having this relentless, abusive roommate living inside your head, constantly whispering how you're not good enough, how you're definitely going to fail, how you're inherently unlovable. And the really insidious thing is, because it's your voice in your head, you often believe it's the absolute truth, not just some cruel echo of past trauma.
That's terrifying. And how does that toxic shame differ from, like, normal shame? We all feel shame sometimes, right?
Right. And that's a crucial distinction. Normal, healthy shame is a healthy, self-regulating reaction. It arises naturally when someone witnesses us acting in a way that's unfair or hurtful or maybe inappropriate. It helps us regulate our behavior in social contexts. It's functional. Toxic shame, however, often erupts internally, without any external witness needed. It's an internal, self-inflicted attack that screams that you are fundamentally flawed, worthless, or defective as a person, not just that you made a mistake or did something wrong. Walker recounts a client's constant internal refrains, these dialogues that would just torment her. If only I wasn't so needy, if only I could pitch a perfect game, I'm always doing something wrong. These internal criticisms become this relentless, self-perpetuating torment. It's like a personal prison built entirely from internalized criticism.
And then there's the outer critic.
Yeah.
Which is basically the flip side of the coin, right? Applying the same programs, perfectionism, endangerment, but aiming it at other people.
Exactly. It's the counterpart. It rejects people for being imperfect or judges them as unsafe, often as an unconscious way to avoid emotional investment and the deep vulnerability that genuine intimacy requires. This can manifest as silent judgment, where you're just constantly scrutinizing others, finding their flaws, keeping a running tally. Or for fight types especially, it can come out as overt, cutting criticism. It's essentially a way of keeping others at arm's length, unconsciously believing that if they're imperfect, they must be dangerous, and therefore a threat to your fragile sense of safety. Better to push them away first.
And society doesn't exactly help discourage that, does it?
Not at all. What's truly fascinating and kind of depressing here is how deeply entrenched the outer critic becomes, not just within individuals, but actually in society at large. It's language, judgmentalness, sarcasm, cynicism, constant negativity. It's not only normalized, but often actively celebrated in popular media and everyday conversations, even in professional settings sometimes. Walker cites the common practice of skewering people in TV comedies or late-night talk shows as a prime example. The societal reinforcement makes it incredibly harder to dislodge because it just feels like normal communication rather than what it truly is.
Yeah.
A deeply ingrained trauma response that actually perpetuates disconnection and judgment.
Yeah, you see it everywhere once you start looking.
Yeah, totally. And furthermore, an insatiable hunger for negative news, that constant scanning of external threats, can also ensnare the outer critic's tendency for false alarms. It leads to chronic hypervigilance. The critic thrives on perceived threats, whether they're internal or external, and constant exposure to negativity just feeds that loop, making you feel perpetually unsafe and justifying your isolation or your judgment of others. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of danger and mistrust.
Okay, so given how pervasive and insidious these critics are, both inner and outer, what's the pathway to shrinking them? How do survivors even begin to dismantle these deeply ingrained self-sabotaging patterns? It sounds like a monumental task.
It is a monumental task, but it's possible. Shrinking the critic is truly a crucial recovery battle, maybe the most central one. And it absolutely requires confronting denial and minimization first. You have to acknowledge just how pervasive and damaging these internal attacks truly are. You can't fight what you don't acknowledge exists, right? The primary, most powerful tool, Walker argues, is angrily saying no to the critic. And this isn't just a mental exercise, it's meant to be a visceral internal boundary setting against these anti-self processes. He calls it the hammer of self-renovating carpentry that rebuilds our instinct of self-protection, which was often demolished in childhood. Initially, this takes immense effort and, healthy, righteous rage. One website respondent shared this with Walker. It's powerful. Oh my God, has it helped? I get mad now and it just shuts down my anxiety and turns shame into blame anger. This process literally diminishes old self-destructive neural pathways because of brain neuroplasticity. Think of your brain like a landscape with these well-worn paths. Those are the old negative thought patterns. By consistently choosing newer, healthier responses by saying no and activating healthy anger, you're actively carving new neural pathways. You're making the old ones less fused. And eventually, they get overgrown, you are literally reshaping your brain, making it harder for the critic's voice to dominate.
That's fascinating, the idea that you're physically rewiring your brain through this process. And beyond that, really assertive no. What other techniques does Walker recommend for actively working with the critic, for pushing back?
Yeah, besides the big no, he emphasizes thought stopping. This is about catching the critic mid-sentence, halting its exaggerations of danger and self-blame, effectively saying, enough, interrupting the negative spiral before it takes hold. This is often followed by thought substitution and thought correction. This is where you actively replace those negative critical thoughts with a memorized list of your own positive qualities, your accomplishments, maybe some specific affirmations. It's about consciously interrupting the critic's narratives and replacing them with self-affirming truths. Literally flooding your mind with a different, healthier message over and over again.
Like fighting fire with fire, just with truth.
Kind of, yeah. And as we touched on earlier, directing healthy rage at the critic itself. Or even more powerfully, at its original installers, the parents or caregivers who instilled those toxic messages in the first place. That is profoundly powerful. Many survivors were essentially brainwashed into accepting the critic as their primary identity, almost like being in a mini cult where the critic is the leader. This anger work helps to break that loyalty, that hypnotic trance. When you truly grasp how little and defenseless you were when parents or others bullied you into hating yourself, a natural, empowering anger arises. And this anger, when directed constructively outward, can then be channeled towards self-protection and self-advocacy rather than remaining trapped inside as self-hatred or depression.
Okay, so we've talked about what PTSD is, how it develops, the 4 F's, and these insidious critics. But how do we actually heal these deep wounds? It seems like Peter Walker repeatedly points to grieving as an absolutely central, kind of non-negotiable process. How does that truly work?
It can feel heavy, absolutely. But grieving is indeed the essential process for reconnecting with our repressed emotional intelligence and our full complement of feelings. It's necessary to truly release and work through the profound pain of childhood losses. The loss of safety, love, connection, the loss of your authentic self. These losses are like deaths of parts of ourselves, as Walker puts it. And grieving is what allows for their rebirth, for integration. When we grieve, we're not just remembering, we're actively metabolizing these deeply ingrained feelings of abandonment, fear, shame, powerlessness that have been stored in our systems. They need to be felt, acknowledged, and released. It's the soul's natural way, really, of processing pain and moving towards integration, towards wholeness.
Metabolizing the pain, I like that.
Yeah, and a core part of this grieving process, what Walker calls the penultimate grieving practice, is verbal ventilation. This means speaking from your feelings, not just talking about them in a detached way, but expressing them directly, maybe rawly, in a way that truly releases and resolves the emotional distress. It's actually a core trait of emotional intelligence. It actively coordinates the brain hemispheres so that the logical, language-based parts of the brain can work with the emotional, sensation-based parts rather than being overwhelmed by them or disconnected from them during flashbacks. This might involve speaking out loud to an empty chair representing an abuser, or maybe journaling raw emotions without censoring, or sharing vulnerably with a trusted, empathic listener who can just hold space. It's really about giving voice to the voiceless parts of your past.
That makes perfect sense, using language to kind of bridge that gap between feeling and thinking. And Walker emphasizes this yin and yang of grieving, crying and angering, which is interesting because many people tend to lean heavily on one or the other, right? Can you explain why both are so crucial for the whole picture?
Absolutely. The yin and yang is key. So angering the yang is that instinctual, angry response to unfairness. It's an essential component of self-protection. It helps us feel empowered, set necessary boundaries, and symbolically rescue ourselves from that feeling of childlike powerlessness we felt during the original trauma. When we direct healthy anger at the source of our pain, the neglect, the abuse, the injustice, it's incredibly liberating. Walker's own recovery, he shares, involved thousands of angry skirmishes with his inner critic, literally yelling at it, externalizing that fight. It highlights the active, almost combative nature this process can take. It's about reclaiming your power and your fundamental right to protest injustice.
Taking your power back.
Precisely. Then, crying is the complementary process, the yin to anger's yang. It's the natural release of fear before it can spiral into frightening thinking or chronic anxiety. Tears can literally dissolve fear, shame, and feelings of self-abandonment, often leading to this amazing sense of relief, as Walker puts it. He shared a really poignant story of a client who was hospitalized with advanced cancer, feeling utterly alone. And she experienced this spontaneous rainstorm of tears, just wept and wept. This profound emotional release helped her feel okay, somehow centered. Even in the face of this terrifying diagnosis and complete isolation, it just demonstrates the profound physiological and psychological release tears can provide, allowing the nervous system to discharge stored tension and find a measure of peace.
Wow. It's powerful to think of them as truly complementary, two sides of the same essential coin. And what happens if someone relies only on anger or only on crying? Does it not work as well?
That's exactly right. It leads to an incomplete release. If someone, say, traditionally many men rely predominantly on anger, or perhaps traditionally many women only on crying, it leads to what Walker accurately calls moodiness. These are stagnant, lingering emotions like resentment that never quite goes away, or cynicism, or that shame-tainted self-pity that remain trapped, causing this chronic state of emotional discomfort. Full emoting, embracing both healthy anger and self-compassionate tears is crucial for truly clearing these emotional blockages and allowing for a genuine, complete release of past pain. It's about moving that stagnant energy out of the body, allowing for flow and vitality again.
Getting unstuck emotionally.
Yeah, and mindfulness also plays a huge role here. It serves as a compassionate observer and a powerful tool in this healing journey. Psychologically speaking, mindfulness is about taking undistracted time to become fully aware of your thoughts and feelings in the present moment, but without judgment. This awareness then allows you more choice in how you respond to them, rather than just reacting automatically from those old trauma patterns. It beautifully weds self-observation with self-compassion. It functions like a healthily developed ego or a witnessing self that can objectively and self-acceptingly observe your inner experiences, creating a sense of inner spaciousness, a bit of distance from the intensity.
So mindfulness essentially helps us gain agency over our internal world, stop being swept away by it. How does it apply specifically to emotional experience in PTSD recovery? Because emotions can feel so overwhelming.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps us stop automatically dissociating from feelings, which is such a common C-PTSD coping mechanism, just checking out. It allows us to gently identify feelings, maybe name them, oh, that's fear, or okay, sadness is here, and then choose healthier responses instead of reacting blindly. This extends powerfully to the emotional experience, especially with things like depression. Mindfulness helps metabolize depression by distinguishing depressed thinking, which often needs to be identified, challenged, and eliminated as a critic-driven pattern from depressed feeling. The latter, a true emotional state, sometimes simply needs to be felt as a legitimate signal from your body, maybe a signal for rest or self-care or a call for change rather than being shamed or suppressed. It's about learning the crucial difference between the critic's lies and your body's legitimate emotional signals.
Learning to listen differently. And Walker describes his own personal journey into feeling, doesn't he? By consciously dedicating time daily just to sit with his fear sensations, actively overcoming his deeply ingrained busyholic tendencies. That sounds incredibly difficult.
Oh, profoundly difficult, especially for a flight type.
Yeah. This deliberate practice led to what he calls a psychological bodywork method, where he used his mind to literally massage fear, tension, and trauma out of his body. It's such a profound example of how consistent, gentle attention can unlock stored emotional pain. He notes, with his beautiful mix of humor and profound insight, I am now truly Pete Walker, not Pete Runner, as I was nicknamed in childhood. That transformation just speaks volumes, doesn't it? About the power of embracing one's inner world, moving from constant escape to actually being present in your own body, in your own life. Okay, so a core aspect of C-PTSD, as you've said, is that it's an attachment disorder fundamentally, a lack of a safe, consistent adult bond in childhood. It's a deep relational wound. So if that's the case,
How do we heal this deep relational pain, which feels so central to the whole PTSD experience? Does healing have to happen in relationship?
You've really highlighted the heart of it. Yes, healing this relational wound often absolutely requires a reparative relational experience. This can be with a therapist who truly understands trauma, or maybe a trusted empathic partner, or even a supportive friend who can consistently stay present and attuned when things get difficult. Pete Walker views CPTSD as having emotional neglect right at its core, meaning the child had literally no one to model the relational skills necessary for healthy intimacy, reciprocity, connection. So in recovery, we're essentially learning how to relate in a healthy, reciprocal way, often for the very first time in our lives, but doing it within the safety of a new kind of relationship.
Learning by doing, in a safe space.
Exactly. And there are several key elements to this relational healing, each one really crucial for building that earned, secure attachment we talked about. First, empathy. This involves the therapist or friend showing deep understanding, active and compassionate listening, and sometimes sharing emotionally analogous autobiographical free associations to build profound trust. Walker shared that powerful example. A client was deeply ashamed of staying home just because of a pimple. Walker, remembering his own intense childhood shame over having a cold sore, shared his experience, just saying simply, "I get it, I know that feeling." This seemingly small act made the client tear up, laugh, and months later, she told him her trust in him just mushroomed at that exact moment. This kind of authentic, shared connection where one person truly gets the other's internal experience, it's incredibly transformative.
That feeling of being truly seen and understood, maybe for the first time. And building on that empathy, another crucial element you mentioned is authentic vulnerability. It sounds simple, but Walker says real intimacy correlates directly with the courage to share vulnerabilities, right?
Absolutely. He recounts how the glacier of my lifelong loneliness began to melt as he increasingly practiced emotional authenticity himself, allowing himself to be seen for who he truly was, imperfections, past pain, and all. It's that paradox of vulnerability. By allowing ourselves to be seen in our messiness, we invite true connection and start to dismantle those lonely walls we built for protection.
It takes courage, though.
Huge courage. Then there's dialogicality. This occurs when two people in conversation move fluidly and interchangeably between speaking sound, which is an aspect of healthy narcissism, expressing oneself and one's needs, and listening, which is an aspect of healthy codependence, tuning into and appreciating the other person. Imagine a healthy tennis match, right? Both players hit the ball back and forth, each giving the other a chance to return it, enjoying the rhythm of the exchange. That's dialogicality. Such reciprocal interactions prevent either person from polarizing into that dysfunctional narcissistic style where only one person talks, or a codependent relating style where one person only listens and never shares. This balanced back and forth is a key characteristic of healthy adult intimacy.
The rhythm of connection. And inevitably, in any real relationship, misunderstandings happen, ruptures occur. So collaborative rapport repair becomes another vital element, doesn't it? How does that work in healing?
It's absolutely vital. When misunderstandings inevitably occur, and they will in any healthy relationship, especially in therapy, the therapist owning their part in the rupture, taking responsibility for their side, helps to deconstruct the client's outer critic belief that relationships must be perfect or that any conflict signals the end. This models constructive conflict resolution and helps the client learn, maybe for the first time, that ruptures can be repaired. That disagreement doesn't mean abandonment. It builds invaluable, real-world skills for their relationships outside of therapy. It shows that mistakes are actually opportunities for deeper connection, not just reasons to run away.
Learning that conflict can be safe.
Huge. And through this consistent process of relational healing empathy, vulnerability, dialogue, repair clients can achieve what's known as earned, secure attachment. In the safety of a reparative relationship, clients learn, perhaps for the very first time, that they are fundamentally acceptable, no matter what they feel, no matter what comes up. This profound acceptance melts that toxic shame and significantly reduces their fear of being seen as defective or too much. And this allows them to diminish those lifelong habits of isolating or pushing others away during emotional flashbacks. They gradually build an internal sense of safety, belonging, and connection. They learn to co-regulate with a safe other, realizing they don't have to face overwhelming emotions completely alone anymore.
That sounds incredibly hopeful. And this leads directly into the concept of self-reparenting, which sounds profoundly empowering. What does that truly entail, giving yourself what you didn't get?
That's exactly it, in essence. Self-reparenting means actively nurturing that inner child, that younger wounded part of yourself, with the healing words, the compassion, the validation that were never heard from parents or caregivers. Walker describes it as a yin-yang dynamic, balancing this internal self-reparenting work with also allowing yourself to be reparented by others, like a compassionate therapist, a kind friend, maybe a supportive group. It's about consciously giving yourself the unconditional love, validation, protection, and consistent attunement you missed out on in childhood. Essentially becoming the good enough parent to yourself that you always needed.
Becoming your own safe base.
Yes. And powerful affirmations are really central to self-reparenting. They help to reprogram those deeply ingrained negative messages from the critic. Simple, direct messages like, I am so glad you were born, you are a good person, I love who you are, and I'm doing my best to always be on your side. All of your feelings are okay with me. These aren't just empty words, they are vital, conscious counter-messages. They help counteract the inner critic's negative programming and build a new, solid foundation of self-compassion and self-esteem from the inside out. It's about truly internalizing these truths, letting them sink in deep.
Repeating them until they feel true. And Walker's personal journey really brings this concept of finding your tribe and self-reparenting to life in such a poignant way, doesn't it? He reflects on finding members of his real tribe all over the world, in really unexpected places like Australia, the army, even in jail during some of his most challenging early life experiences. He notes, kind of wryly, that if it hadn't been for gross parental incompetence, I would have missed all those life-enriching interactions.
It's such a powerful testament to how adversity, ironically, can sometimes lead to unexpected connections and a deeper sense of belonging, forging bonds based on shared understanding and resilience, rather than just superficiality, finding your people where you find them.
Exactly, finding connection in unexpected places, based on authenticity.
Okay, let's talk about forgiveness for a moment. This is a topic that can often be really fraught with misunderstanding, and often carries a lot of external pressure, especially for trauma survivors. Pete Walker notably challenges that common idea of just forgive and forget, particularly for survivors of Clue to Estate, which I think is a really important distinction to make. He absolutely does, and it's a crucial point of his work, I think. Walker believes many survivors are pressured into this kind of premature and ultimately empty forgiveness, which, far from healing, actually drives them back into denial and forces them to minimize the profound impact of their trauma all over again. This premature forgiveness actually halts their recovery processes. It often leaves their inner critics plenty of ammunition to denigrate them for being unforgiving or holding on to the past. True forgiveness, especially when it comes to abusers, simply cannot happen without first processing the deep pain, allowing for genuine anger, and cultivating robust self-compassion. Forgiveness in this context is a feeling-based experience that arises naturally after a thorough grieving process is well underway, not some mental exercise imposed from the outside or treated like a moral imperative you have to achieve. You simply can't authentically forgive what you haven't fully acknowledged and grieved first.
That takes so much pressure off.
It really does. And what's truly insightful here, connected to this, is the concept of healthy blame. Blame often gets a bad rap, right? But Walker reframes it. Blame, at its core, is an instinctual, angry response to unfairness. It's an innate impulse of self-protection. It's your system saying, hey, this was wrong and it wasn't my fault. It allows for the healthy release of resentment and the refusal to take responsibility for wrongs that genuinely aren't one's fault. This process helps to diminish denial, allowing the unvarnished truth of the harm done to surface. Without healthy blame, that legitimate anger often turns inward, festering as self-hatred, self-blame, and that toxic shame we talked about. So healthy blame is about accurately assigning responsibility, not necessarily about seeking revenge or staying stuck in bitterness.
That reframes blame in such a powerful way. It shifts it from something negative we should avoid to potentially an act of self-protection, of truth-telling. It reminds me of a toddler's angry no, that early instinctual expression of blame, a primal way of setting boundaries and protesting unfairness. It seems survivors must reclaim that fundamental right to protest unfairness and say no, especially when they've been conditioned for so long to people-pleasers just accept mistreatment. This feels like a fundamental empowering step in self-protection and reclaiming agency.
Exactly right. Reclaiming your no is huge. And the starting point for any true forgiveness, especially the kind that actually liberates you, is often self-forgiveness. Walker offers this profoundly powerful affirmation that really encapsulates this. It goes, for each of the ways I have hurt myself through action or inaction out of fear, pain, and confusion, I now extend a full and heartful forgiveness. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. This acknowledges that our self-destructive patterns, our self-abandonment, our people-pleasing, they often stem directly from our trauma and our desperate survival responses. It allows for deep compassion for ourselves, first and foremost. It's about releasing that internal pressure to have somehow navigated trauma perfectly and recognizing your resilience instead.
Forgiving yourself for how you survived.
Precisely. And, if we connect all this to the bigger picture, the long-term recovery from complex trauma, though it is incredibly challenging, there's no denying that, it can actually lead to a depth of emotional intelligence far beyond the societal norm. Survivors who commit to and stick with this often arduous process, they frequently evolve out of the emotional impoverishment of the general society, as Walker puts it. They develop this profound, nuanced understanding of feelings, of human relationships, of their own inner landscape that many untraumatized individuals may actually never achieve. It's like an earned wisdom forged in the fire.
That's a really beautiful thought, isn't it? That intense challenge can lead to profound growth, to a deeper way of being. Walker compares effective recovery to unwinding the natural potential you were born with out of your unconscious. It's like unraveling a tightly wound spring, allowing that innate vitality, that authentic playfulness, that boundless curiosity and genuine spontaneity to finally emerge, maybe after decades of being suppressed. This includes gaining greater overall evolution as a human being, he suggests, and a newfound openness to new, healthy things like maybe voluntary simplicity or engaging in meditation, cultivating deeper emotional communication, finding genuine peace in ways you couldn't before. It's really about becoming your full, authentic self, unburdened by the weight of the past and stepping into a life of purpose and presence. Okay, so today we've taken a really deep dive into the complex and often silent world of C-PTSD. We went from its roots in profound emotional neglect through the various 4F survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. We look at the insidious nature of the inner and outer critic, and then crucially, we explore the transformative power of grieving, of relational healing, and deep self-compassion. We've really seen how Pete Walker's insights provide not just a diagnosis, but a truly hopeful roadmap for healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this whole body of work, this healing journey, it isn't just about healing past wounds, as important as that is. It's fundamentally about reclaiming your full, authentic self. It's about developing what Walker calls a fierce allegiance to yourself, learning to be on your own side, and potentially, achieving a depth of emotional intelligence and connection that truly surpasses the societal norm. It's crucial to remember recovery is a progressive journey. It often feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's normal. But it is ultimately one that can lead to profound peace, fulfillment, and a life lived with genuine presence. The capacity for healing, for growth, and even for joy is always within you, waiting to be unearthed, no matter how buried it feels.
That's a powerful note to end on. So as you, listening, reflect on this deep dive today, what really stands out to you? How might understanding these concepts, the 4Fs, the critic, the power of grieving, relational repair, how might it help you, or maybe someone you know, begin to untangle the threads of past pain and start unwinding your own innate potential, perhaps discovering a deeper, more authentic version of yourself you never even knew was there, waiting?